Welcome to another Sigma Live Hangout. Today we have with us Brian Colbert, the author of The Happiness Habit and From Ordinary to Extraordinary. He's going to speak to us about neuro-linguistic programming. Welcome, Brian.
How you doing?
So let's start. What is neuro-linguistic programming exactly?
Okay. Basically, neuro stands for neurology, okay, so how your brain works. Linguistic stands for language, both verbal and non-verbal language, and program is your ability to program your own brain and influence others. So basically it's the technology around those concepts. You can use it to help improve your life, improve how you think, improve how you respond in the world, to manage your emotions, to be able to alter belief systems. So it's a very powerful technology. It's used in companies and it's used for therapy as well, but it started off in therapy first.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that you can use it to alter moods.
Yeah.
How do you alter your mood or change your frame of mind using neuro-linguistic programming?
Again, using any of the three elements, but ultimately most people's moods are actually governed by how they talk to themselves. Very often people get up in the morning, they talk down to themselves, like they give themselves abuse. Basically, they look in the mirror and they say, you're too old, you're too fat, you're too ugly, whatever it is that they do, yeah? And then they wonder why they're not happy, yeah? So, and then they go to a therapist, and the therapist says, well, if you go look back into your past, you don't have to go into your past, you can go into 5 minutes ago. You've got about 80,000 thoughts in any one day, and for a lot of people, they're not good thoughts. They're criticisms about themselves. So one of the basic, quick, really fast ways of actually changing your mood is changing how you talk to yourself. If you listen to the way you talk to yourself and ask yourself, if you're talking to your own best friend, would you talk to yourself that way? And the reality is a lot of us know. And strangely enough, some people, women in particular, for some strange reason, very often have their mother's, kind of cross voice in their head. So, you know that voice when someone calls you by your first name, you're in trouble. A lot of women have that inside their mind, which is not really good to wake up in the morning and to be given out to. That's pretty much it. So change something like that and you can change that. But you can also change how you see things. A lot of time, just because we've got thoughts and just because we've had experiences, we store them there in gestalts inside our brain and we run them as truth. Now the reality is you can go inside your mind and change how you think. You can change the structure of that. You can change how you look at something inside your mind. You can change the color, you can change the sound, and as a result you can change the feelings with it as well. So you don't have to deal with the problem, you just have to deal with the way it's actually presented to you. When you do that, you can get huge responses.
And so we talked about, you said you can use it in the workplace and you can use it in companies and things like that. How do you really use it in the workplace? To drive? Do you drive your employees with it? Does it, to better your company? How is it really used in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, just to give you an example, I do work like companies like Pepsi and Google and CRH, companies that are very big companies. The last intervention I done with Pepsi increased its output in the area that was working, basically its output by 20%. Now, all I really done there was give them a set of questions, and NLP is really good with language in that way. Give them a set of questions so they could actually engage the workforce in a really good way, in a really responsible way. A lot of the time what happens, we look at behavior. We look at the behaviors that are actually successful or behaviors that cause problems. So when you're in, say, a context like that, you'll find out how is the person communicating? Are they actually listening? Very often, say, a manager will come in or a team leader will come in and they'll sit in and they'll say, okay, now tell me how things are going, John. And John says, well, blah, 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 blah. And then they turn around, they tell John how they think things are going, which meant they never really listened. So really what we do is we teach them how to listen first, to elicit information, because NLP is about eliciting information from the person you're working with. And eliciting means really listening, really tuning in, and drawing out what's inside their brain. Because once you know what's going on inside a person's brain, then you can influence it. And that's really the key to it. A lot of the time, we're actually listening with the intent to respond. Very often we're in a conversation and we're talking away in our own head about what we're going to say next or what's going to come next. And that's not listening, that's not communicating. The very simple act, and we know that from science, the simple act of listening to someone can actually create really powerful results. The person can feel validated, approved, and recognized. So now you don't need a lot of the motivational strategies that people use to try and get people to do things. If you actually connect with them on a real, on a genuine, on an authentic basis, then what you find is that the real human beings start to surface, and you find you've got a creative, a cooperative, and engaged workforce. Now, Pepsi are really good at that anyway, but when you do it in this way, you can actually get increase in productivity, and people coming in suggesting ideas because now they're being listened to, and the ideas are being followed through. So simple little, really simple tools, practical tools that can transform an entire workforce in literally in a matter of months. You know, it's incredible what you can do. The skills are very simple. They're very practical, very basic, but they are very, very precise. And precision is really what NLP is about.
And so why do you think it's so important people get on board with neurolinguistic programming and, you know, try and put it into their businesses and into their daily lives, at least, even in a personal level?
Sure. If the simple thing is, what we all want is we all want to be successful, we all want to be happy, we all want to be amused, we all want to be captivated, we all want to feel good. That's the simple reason that we're looking for. NLP studies that. NLP is the science of excellence. It studies, it finds people that are successful, says, what is it the difference that makes a difference for those guys? What do they do that makes them exceptional in their own life? What do they do that gives them their success? How can they do? We look at someone, and if they're happy, what are they doing inside their head to make themselves happy? Because you read books about happiness, and I've written a book on happiness, but you read books about happiness, it says, you know what you need to do, blah, 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 and I'm sure you've done it yourself, and I've done it, and then you come and say, I must do that, but you never get around to doing it. NLP does it differently. It doesn't tell you what to do, it shows you how to do it. So now you try it, and this is what works. The Happiness Habit basically is an example of a book that is literally an instruction manual. You could read that book, and you won't get quotes from it. It won't say, life is blah, 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 because I'm not interested in that. What I can show you is, if you do this, then you get to be happier. If you do this, you'll get to be more successful. If you do this, basically you'll be able to influence people more. So it's really about the reason why people would engage in something like this. NLP, in Ireland we would say it's like the cream on a pint of Guinness. Now, in Ireland we like our Guinness, yeah? The cream is the best part, okay? What it does, it's not even a discipline. It looks at other disciplines and elicits what's the really good stuff from that discipline and say, okay, when we sum it all down, when we distill it right down, say, what is it in that that makes a difference? What part of that makes it work? So we look at therapy, we look at business, we look at nutrition, we look at anything at all, and we say, what are the parts that make the difference, that makes a difference? Where can we get the excellence from? And so if you're interested in becoming excellent yourself or becoming happy yourself, that's where you search for. This is a collection of practical tools, a simple psychology system that transfers things really easy. It doesn't make promises that a lot of things do. It says, you do this and you get this, so it's practical. It's testable straight away. There's no sort of in-between. You don't say, oh, I must try that sometime, or that's a good idea. It's literally, you try this, it works or it doesn't work. It's as simple as that.
And so how has the scientific and medical community really responded to NLP and reacted and use it? Do they use it to treat, you know, psychological problems? Can it be used?
Yeah. In the first instance, really slowly and really negatively. Okay, the first instance, the difference with NLP is that NLP is the science of subjective experience, and that very word, subjective, goes against the face of science, because science tries to be objective, yeah? So, and the reason for subjectivity being that everybody's different, okay? But it has a collection of patterns, and science is eventually catching up with it now. It sees that there's a process behind it. So I've done a lot of study on the different psychologists. I'm a social psychologist in training. But I went back through the systems and I found a lot of the patterns that we use in NLP are actually already in psychology, but they're just in different places, that's all. Science now is recognizing things like, you know, the attitude of gratitude. Being grateful for things actually produces a quantifiable change in your neurology. Being mindful allows you to be able to increase clarity. These are all things we've been saying forever. So, you know, NLP collected the ideas without the scientific imperative, basically, and it done it deliberately. Okay, so okay, we'll let the scientists catch up when they're ready to catch up. We'll find out what works now, let's use it now, and worry about the science later. A little bit like driving a car. If you're a racing driver, you really don't care what's under the hood insofar as long as it does what you want it to do. And those people that tell you when you're driving that, say, you can't do that, the racing driver will tell you, yeah, really, and they break that rule. NLP is a bit like that. It says, okay, we've got the science, we know what to do, but see, can we push it further and let the scientists prove that we're right later on. Okay, so NLP really is about an attitude as well. It's about looking at life, finding out what works and applying it. Okay, fortunately, science is catching up all of the time, and now this is standard and conventional. People will use it in therapy. People will use it in interventions. It's been used in therapy for years anyway. The counselling professions are starting to draw in pieces of it now. You know, when we talk about counselling and therapy, it comes right back to Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls and people like that, Milton Erickson, great hypnotherapist, Alfred Korbisky, a great linguist. So it has its depths from people that were already bathed in science anyway. But it didn't worry too much about the science. It worried about the practicality, the workability. The common person doesn't care how the science was formed. It just wants to know, does it work first? and then we'll check the science later. NLP takes that approach.
And so you mentioned something about communities, and can it be used to influence not only a work community, but a community at large? Is NLP something that's more on a personal level, or is it something that can be used beyond a personal level to influence the mind frame of a group?
It can. Its first sort of basis is subjective, is personal and individual. Okay, and it started off first as remedial. So what is it that is not working in people, and can we fix it? Okay, so that's where it began. But remember, we're social creatures anyway. So as the profiling aspect of it developed, and I've done a lot of work on that myself, as you begin to understand how people operate, how they think, how they sort, how they make decisions, how they're motivated, how they solve problems, how they like information presented to them, then at that point, now you're moving into the social aspect, you're moving into the group aspect. And a lot of my work, by the way, is I go in, a company will say, listen, Brian, we've got some problems, we've got some conflict. I said, okay, let me do a course. Don't bother about the conflict. Let me do a course and we'll solve the conflict. Because what I'll do is I'll bring the people in together. I get a nice profiling system going where they start to see the patterns that they exhibit are actually patterns that they call conflict, yeah? And when they see it in one another, say, that's just a decision-making pattern, that's just a sort pattern, that's just a preference pattern, that type of thing, and it dissolves the conflict. So yes, it can be applied in a corporate setting, in a social setting, in a community setting, and it has been, and to great effect, but not everybody can apply it. My advantage is that my background is social science first. So I tend to look for it to do that anyway, and I've developed within that to make it do that way. But it started, it's subjective, but it has that wider application. It can change the world, really, to put it honest. If you're at your best, think about the influence you can have on everybody, and that's ultimately where it goes.
And you talked about maybe using it to change your mind frame and even help yourself, just be more upbeat. But if you have a sort of chemical imbalance, especially, as psychologists put it sometimes, where they give you medicine for something, is it helpful in this way? Does it, can it help alter any sort of chemical imbalances that someone might have in a psychological?
Yeah, let's take sort of the extreme version, which would be bipolar. Yeah, basically, if a person is bipolar, they have a lithium deficiency in the brain. Now, what we would say first, all thinking is chemical anyway, so we know that. We know that antidepressants, and the research has shown this as well, antidepressants produce more problems than they solve, but they do solve problems, okay? If a person is bipolar, it makes sense for them to stay on medication without question. But they can do medication and they can do cognitive interventions as well, which is where NLP comes in. So you can do both. What we would always say, work in combination with the systems that are there. Work complementary to them. Be aware that basically that, if your doctor is saying you need this medication, generally they're right, yeah? Now there's ways out of it and ways through it, but if it's bipolar and extreme, rather than reactive depression is something that NLP is really good at, okay? That being said though, the NLP practitioner needs to have a skill beyond just NLP by itself. Needs best to be a therapist while they're doing that as well, because NLP latches onto those things as well. So ultimately, it's helpful, it can help, but it's best to work with things rather than to replace things. We don't say NLP is better than this. NLP is a practical tool. It says, let's work with this, and you get the results. The doctors know what they're doing in general. Basically, they've gone to college for a long time, not for no reason. Yes, we can sort of accuse them of overprescribing things and stuff like that, but ultimately, generally, the doctor has got a good intention and also good information as well. Yes, sometimes it's overprescribed, or sometimes we're too lazy to change it, but ultimately, working together is the way around these things, and NLP can fit in with it.